So this is where we're going to start with kind of a group exercise. So we just covered a lot, and again, this is not for all stages of development or anything like that. There's a lot of nuances to it. This is just, we're trying to give you a relatively quick overview. Google some things. There's resources on our website. Reach out, ask questions. This is the part where we're going to outline a posted exercise. I know, kind of funny, we've been talking about this the whole time, but that helps align the team. So similar to the workflow mapping, but more about how do you take and start to prioritize these major improvements. Like, let's say you got through the workflow mapping and you're like, yep, we need to buy more, different purchasing software, different, labor tracking software, different equipment management software, whatever it is, pretty major change or something like that. Or we need to enter this market. We need to enter the healthcare market or expand our offices out to a certain location. So another kind of a 2x2 matrix way of looking at things, having one axis that's what's the return from a low return to a high return, and from the other axis being basically what's our execution on it from low to high, and that's a combination of time, cost, and risk, right? And risk could show up in several different ways, but it's like reasonably, what's our execution? Risk is it really high cost and low risk? Is it a modest cost and a really high risk of probability of failure? And those things would mathematically come out differently. So in concept, fairly straightforward. And if you have obviously something that's a very, very high cost and a very low return, that's pretty simple. It's the kill category. And if it's got a very high return and a very low cost and short time frame and everything, that's an implement category. So those two categories are really, really easy. The hard category is the one that's in the upper right quadrant, which is why they call it the challenge category, because it's got both a high cost and probably a long time frame on return, and it's got a potentially very, very high return. And challenge the challenge with that challenge quadrant is that I don't think you can be a contractor without being an optimist. I mean, let's face it. There's other things you could do besides making a living in construction and starting at 0 dark 30 every morning and taking on, so you're not going to pay me for 90 days, no matter how fast I get it done. There's not to say there's no other industries, but let's face it, this is one of those more challenging industries. So we're mostly optimists that are optimists are going to make it to the top of the organization, where by and large, and those are the people that are going to be making these decisions. So you have to work against that bias, because these are those big risks, right? And so you've really got to look at that and know that you're going to have that bias walking into it. Make sure that you don't go forward on something that has a very high risk just because you're enamored with the return on it. They call it summit fever. They call it there's all kinds of optimism bias. They call it all kinds of different things. But either way, it'll kill you if you're a mountaineer and you go for the top of Everest and a snowstorm comes up. So it's worthwhile reading that book. Everybody was experienced, and yet it was lots of people die every year. So with that said, now that we got that downer in, let's go get into the group exercise. And we're going to call it Pick Smart. So, and it has to do with both picking the right, objectives and then defining those objectives properly. The general, I guess, facilitation tool that we're going to be talking about here is called an Affinity diagram, or the KJ method. It's got its history back in the 1960s, and where and you can look this up, but in general, it's for taking really disparate groups of people, and and everybody sees things differently. Like, Sue, you always talk about like the picture that's in your head is complete. You have a very vivid picture in your head, and I've got a very vivid picture in my head. And the problem is there is no way for us to actually communicate what that is.
Right.
Like, there just isn't. And so the magic of scaling an organization, getting teams to work together, is to try and make your picture as visible and my picture visible, and then working to go take the best of both of those and probably come up with option C that's better than either one of us could come up on our own. So it's really a process that's about getting people to share and then getting people to organize, and you start to see where people have what people have affinity for and things like that. That's why they call it that. The KJ method was just the gentleman's initials. So here's what you do. Pretty straightforward. Maybe run the team through some basic training. Maybe you constrain this activity a little bit to a certain part of the contractor's business model. Like, maybe you constrain it down to just their just the project value stream, or just the talent value stream, or even just a segment of it. But either way, just define the boundaries and get the team, assemble the right team that's there. And this team can be much, much broader, right? So this doesn't have to be, this is not the decision-making team. This is the brainstorming and alignment team. So this team can be a lot broader and everything. So don't think about this as an efficiency exercise. Once they're there, have them call it 3+2. Identify 3 big bottlenecks, 3 things that are really slowing down our internal operations, and 2 external opportunities. And that way you're seeing who thinks very internally, and truly 80% of your people probably should be thinking mostly internally, right? Because that's their job. And 20% of the people are going to have some pretty cool external ideas. That's probably the right ratio. But you always want to stretch everybody to go see all these things. So have them write those down on a Post-it note, what, when, who, how, encourage them to be constructive, but don't avoid the uncomfortable. It's like, if I'm in charge of, a department or something, just go ahead and say it. Like, yeah, they're having a lot of bottleneck in Dave's department, and we're not getting whatever, the drawings out or something out of his department. Just say it. Or there's a lot of errors, and you're not trying, and it's hard, but you've got to make sure that people aren't just avoiding it because they might like me. That's never actually been the case in my career, but whatever. Get them down to where too general, too many, just right? Like, so too general is like if somebody says, we need more training in here. Like, training and communication always come up. They're like the whitewash type of thing. Now, like, okay, let's get more specific. And then there's too many where there's somebody that threw away the Sharpie that you gave them, and they busted out the number 2 pencil or something, and they've gotten really, really small writing. They've got we've seen dozens of things on a list, like literally with them lined out like it was a checklist. Like, let me tell you everything that's wrong with you on one Post-it note. So get to the just right part, right? Like, okay, hey, I'm in accounting, and I'd just like to know when you guys win a project so I can get it set up so that I can run payroll when, first labor hits the job. Just simple request. That's a really, that's a common one. So that's an example, and just get it just right. Then go through there and have everybody post it up, and then set a timeline. So get everybody, first of all, like, give them a certain amount of time to come up with these, they're 5, they're 3+2, probably give them 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes for this. Ask them to really think. And, like, for different types of exercises like this, you want to give people more time. In this case, you really want them to think. Like, this is not a brainstorming of how many you can get. This is like, what do you think your top 3 are? And you're going to learn a lot about the organization based on that. You might want to use Sue's advice on using some different color Post-its at this point, for the reason of being able to see who wrote down what, and because it's not, you're not pointing anybody out. You're just trying to identify who's thinking about what at what time. And then once they've posted, they've taken the time, they posted them all up. That's step 1. Then go through there and run through a grouping exercise, and maybe set your time of, like, target time of 10 minutes. Oh, and I'll say, you know what, Sue, this is actually one, when they're posting it up, like, as you set the rules, this is great. Sue usually always sets a person that's like a gatekeeper. So when, they go to post it on the wall, like, nobody can actually post it directly on the wall. So it's got to go to the gatekeeper. And then Sue, like, stands right next to the gatekeeper and gives them coaching on, like, back to the too general, too many, just right type of thing. Can you describe how you approach that? Like, who do you end up looking for in the group when you're doing this? And then what do you do? Because I think that's actually a super valuable step.
Yeah, we've done this before in groups from 10 to 30, right? So there have been some pretty big groups. But yeah, the interesting part is, one, trying to figure out who's been paying attention from the last slide, and actually put one item per Post-it note with enough information that it was going to make sense, if somebody read it a little bit later. And so what would happen is, one of the groups we had, I know one, I had probably about 12 people in it, and we started posting them all up there. And it was a matter of one person was they had gone up there first, and they'd had some pretty good ideas. But then they kind of sat there and were starting to read other people's things, and they were really kind of having some comments on them. So I pulled them back and said, okay, well, then I'm going to have you be our, what we always call them is they were going to be the rubber duck. That if you were a rubber duck and you knew absolutely nothing, would this post it note mean anything to you? So now everybody had to go through our rubber duck, and the rubber duck would read it and go, I don't understand what this means. Please tell me. Or I'd send them back to rewrite it. And then somebody else would come up and say, we're trying to get better productivity in this one item. And he's going, okay, well, is this on all jobs? Is this on one job? How specific is this? So send him back to rewrite. But it was a really good exercise, because in this particular case we had somebody who wasn't really being disruptive, but wasn't being completely engaged with others. Did their part, but then wasn't being completely engaged. So for that reason, I brought them in on that one. Other times it's the person who really maybe is struggling the most with it, where it's a matter of, hey, read these other ones, and if you have a question, let's go back and find the person and have them rewrite it so that it can be read a week, a month from now, and still be as understandable as it is in the context of the meeting today. So we tend to find the people that once they're doing it, can they communicate well? Are they able to ask good questions to get, a revised post-it note? Are they encouraging others to write a few more things, right? Hey, we got a couple more minutes. Let's write a few more. So you start to see how they, kind of go back to the Clifton strengths, how they interact with people and how they become part of that team, or what part of that team they really are. And David, I know you and I have done it a couple of times before, and it's always very interesting to see how people use that kind of post up thing. I've actually had a few people that have volunteered to be the person, the gatekeeper, right? And say, hey, I'll
Yeah.
let me do that. I think I have some questions, right? So those are the ones that are looking for usually one of two things. One is either to get some of their knowledge out by asking better questions, or they don't think they know enough and they want to ask those questions of others when those are going up there. So there's a lot of different reasons to have people do that, and I don't know of any one that hasn't turned out well, because we've used different people at different times in these exercises to kind of be that gatekeeper, or even the timekeeper, right? Just keep everybody engaged and involved. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think probably the one thing to caution against is not this is not a 100% rule, but in general, be really aware of people that are higher up on the org chart doing this, just because people will take feedback as judgment, things like that. This is a people development exercise. This is not a debating exercise. This is not any of those things. This so it's like we're looking for that person that is, high attention to detail, good communicator, and building that person. So, and again, not 100%. I mean, we've definitely seen some people in leadership positions do a phenomenal job doing this, but they are usually at the size company where they shouldn't be doing it, just because there should be a half dozen other people that could do that. So they shouldn't be doing it from a talent development standpoint. But then, to be super honest, we've seen lots of control freaks. I'm in that category, right? So I would, yeah, that's a dumb idea. Why don't you go back and rewrite that? So anyways, it's really important to get at this stage. This is about getting people's ideas and thoughts clearly on the playing field. This is not about debating them at this point, at this stage. So that gets them, kind of to step one. Super important to get there. Then step two is to go through there, and much like we talked about in the high involvement workflow, getting the people to go through the grouping exercise, right? So now you've taken in, if you have 20 people in the room, you have 100 post-its up on the board. And so now it's like, so hopefully there's a lot of overlap. Hopefully it's not 100 unique post-its. And so now it's about starting to group these things together. And if it's a smaller group, if it's, 6, 7 people, go ahead and just set your stopwatch, 10 minutes, and they should be able to organize those into groups. If it's a larger group, do it in, 2 to 3 minute cycle times and pair up, different people in groups of 2 or 3 to go up there and start working on the organization. Because again, you're not trying to get this task completed at this point in time. You are trying to align people. And so by them constantly physically interacting with these different Post-it notes and looking at it, and they have to read it to understand it. If they can't understand it, they've got to go back there and ask, for somebody to rewrite it. They may take some time to rewrite the thing on the spot so that, just rewrite for clarity. But they're trying to group all of these together. So when you're ending it, it looks somewhat like, step 2, where you've got, you probably a lot more groups than that, but 10 groups or something of Post-it notes under the bottlenecks and problems, which is an internal thing, and opportunities for growth, which is an external thing. You probably got a half dozen, groups there as well. So again, this is about getting all the ideas on the table and making sure that everybody in the room has understood what everybody else is saying to the fullest extent you can what's on a Post-it note. So that's 2. 3 is to go through there and for each group now, you've got these things organized into groups, rewrite and consolidate that group down to a single Post-it note. So, and you're rewriting, don't lose the old Post-it notes. I mean, get lots of pictures of this process as you go through. Trust me, you'll use it. And rewrite, but you're rewriting down, and so now you've got maybe 15 Post-it notes that are remaining that are really clearly describing what's in each group. Obviously open it up to talking at this point in time, but get everybody there. Everybody's got to be really aligned about these 15, because everything else is based on this. So whatever it is, doesn't have to be 15, might be 5, might be 20. But make sure that there's clarity within those notes. So now we get to the fun part. Any comments here on the rewrite part, Sue, or you? Yeah. Oh, pick somebody with neat handwriting.
Yeah, somebody with neat handwriting.
Yeah, not me.
Somebody with neat handwriting, and that they look for whatever that one Post-it is, that they are as clear as they can possibly be for something that if you read 3 weeks later, it would still mean the same thing, right? So looking for clarity of those words.
Right. And ask some questions at this point in time, as as a facilitator. Ask some questions at this time, and this is something going to make this is a process. Once you've done it internally a few times, you can definitely do it. There's no reason not to do it internally. There is some value of having an experienced third-party facilitator walk the team through it. Because then everybody can participate, so nobody's trying to facilitate the thing while they're trying to, they can just really play in the game, so to speak, or back up and watch the entire team. So there's a lot of value of an experienced third-party facilitator. But ask probing questions. So you can only fit so many words on a Post-it note, but ask the questions of the team and ask different team members to really explain it and articulate it, get to the why and everything. Again, this is an alignment exercise. This is alignment brainstorming exercise. So now move them over, arrange them in a circle around the board, and then this is where you're looking for what drives what. So and start drawing lines between, okay, this thing drives that thing. For instance, like submittal approval drives procurement. We can't be buying stuff if we don't have submittal approval. And so submittals come after spec review, right? So like if those were items that you put up on the board, for instance, you would be drawing the connectors between them of like what drives what. And this is just one look at it. There is no decisions at this point. This is just logic of going, well, that Post-it, that thing, has, drives 3 other things. So at least that, and that may be valid or not valid. If it drives 3 other things that are each $100 issues, that's not that big of a deal. But if it drives 3 other pretty major things, then let's focus on that thing, because that's a gating item. Okay, make another copy of the Post-it notes. So rewrite them, rewrite a whole nother set, leave that diagram up on the board, rewrite another set of the Post-it notes. Again, testing out the wording, ask a few more questions for clarification. And that's, we will do some nudging at this point in time. Like if there's things that we see to get it out, another one on the playing field or something, well, we'll be nudging people along a little bit, but rewrite. And then now rank these for business impact. Just, basically the income side of this thing. Like, okay, this is worth $1 million over 3 years. This is worth $500,000 over a year. And so just rank them, highest to lowest. Talk through the why. This is an exercise to go do to get to the teams to, physically they're reordering them. They're talking to each other. They're having discussions. You're listening to that discussion. More important to listen to the discussion and the who, and how the teams interact. Is there a person sitting in the back with their arms crossed, with a bad look on their face? I mean, like what's really happening here? That's what you're looking for as they're going through this exercise. If the team happens to have, like, this is where Sue's always great, if the team happens to have taken, like, say, the Clifton Strengths ahead of time, like she's putting her psychology degree to work and marking up stuff and making notes and all those things, right? She's like usually like super silent in the back of the room, but then, but watching all of these observations going on, make sure that that's happening. Super, super value add, because that's what you're looking for here. Anything on this?
Well, and that's just mentioning the Clifton Strengths. That's where you start to see when we're force ranking things like this. You can see sometimes people that are maybe more project driven, right? They're being brought into this discussion, but more project driven, and you've got others that are more organizationally driven. You can start to see where maybe the project driven people are sitting in the back because they don't necessarily think about things this way. And David mentioned it earlier, right? So, the bigger decision makers in the organization, a lot of times you want to get them to take a back seat, have them be a scribe, have them do something that is not necessarily right in the middle of some of this, because you want to give everybody an opportunity to come to the forefront and express their opinions, right? So you do see a lot of that when you're just standing observing the participants, not just the force ranking, but how the participants are working through all of that discussion and debate.
Yeah, and including how they
Absolutely.
pragmatically quantify these things. I mean, you can't come up with this perfect estimate for a lot of things, but what are the 2 or 3 factors and assumptions that they brought into the mix, and how did they think about it, and how did everybody else agree to it? And it's really neat watching this process happen. You'll see. Oh yeah, I saw that on Thursday, and we're having a conversation about what's the role of a senior project manager. And we were talking about approval limits on change orders and something. There's somebody in the room that has been through this so many times, and they just automatically started bringing it up and calling out metrics of like, okay, we have this many, about this many per year last year that we're over this amount, and so you can start to get an idea of what the workflow. Because if you say like, I want them to look at every single change order, well, that's not going to happen, probably. Or I mean, it might, but it might be that point of diminishing returns. And so it's really important to kind of know the cutoffs, like how many changes were over 100,000, how many were over 150,000, and so on and so forth. So that's again, what the behavior you're looking for, but and you're trying to call that out in people. And so that's where, as a facilitator, ask like, hey, can you look that up? Can you do this? Can you do that? So there's a lot that goes into this piece. So back to rewrite, pick another facilitator. Tighten up the wording a little bit, ask a few more questions of the team to have them articulate what was in an item and why, and then go back and rank these things from control, highest to lowest. And control meaning, like I went out for a run this morning and it was pouring down rain. I had zero control over it. Yesterday it was super sunshiny and everything like that. Got very, very lucky. There was exactly a 1 hour break in the rain. Got our mileage in. But I'm laughing at that. But rain, weather is a huge impact on a construction schedule. How much control do I have over it? Not much. To the degree that maybe I could choose what my start time was, or like when, how I phased out a project to probability shift when there might be certain rain days or something like that. But there's no way, not in control of the weather. As soon as you think you are, it's going to let you know that you're not. And so you're really, putting it, because this factors into your risk, your probability of, being able to change the outcome on that and everything. And so if if it's an issue where you need the customer to act perfectly 100% of the time, and that's the only way that the math works on your prioritization,
Yeah.
yep, just kill that one. That moved to the kill category. So arrange it, have the discussion, get into the why, ask questions. Now what's interesting in that is a lot of time as a contractor is navigating stages of growth at say, whatever, at stage 3 or something, they're going to say that's a no control issue. And at stage 5, that contractor's looking at that and said, yeah, we have 100% control over that. And so that's, that's where you want to challenge people. And it's okay. Both of them are actually right from where they're at. But the problem is if that stage 3 contractor starts to grow and they maintain that mentality and they maintain that culture, they're leaving a lot on the table because they're not trying to take control of something that actually is a controllable item. So it's really kind of an interesting. I was watching two guys argue out in a bar. Right, of course it's going to be two guys arguing it out in a bar, right? That's just how that happens. But yeah, they're arguing out, and he was very big on schedule control, and the other one was like, that's out of my control. The owner, the weather, the this, the that. There was 100 reasons. Equal size contractor, and it's so interesting. Their outcomes are dramatically different because one has the thought that he can control lots of elements of the schedule. And they go through there and they do control lots of elements of the schedule. The other one said, I have to react to the schedule. So this is one where belief and mindset changes all kinds of things. And I would put both of them on at equal intelligence, equal drive, but they have two different belief systems. And it's a very weird thing. And I actually know, how they both got their different belief systems. And then belief systems are hard to change. So anyways, control's one. Any thoughts or anything, or move to the next?
I just laugh because everybody, the next one we go to is the one where everybody really wants to kind of start. So, just because it's.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. All right, well, good intro into it. Yes. So the last thing that we're going to really talk about is what does it cost to do these things? Because it doesn't matter what it costs, it's what's the return, what's our level of control, and all those things. Yeah, what it costs. And yeah, I actually just heard this yesterday at breakfast of going, well, this software costs this and this software costs that. And I'm like, that's probably not how I'd be making that decision. I would say, what's the work that I need done? They're within $100,000. What's the work that I need done? And let's go talk through that. I mean, that's just, the cost is not how I would evaluate those two, unless the checkboxes come up exactly equal, but that's never the case. So yeah, the very last one is like, what's it going to cost over what period of time? Rewrite, pick a different facilitator, ask some new questions, and check it out. So I think that's that one. Then the very last one is going, okay, now let's get to our confidence rating here, right? Of going, we got a pretty good, cost estimate. We got a pretty good return estimate. We got we've talked about our controls. We've talked about that. Let's just be really honest with ourselves, given our capabilities and our track record and the past and all those things. What's our risk of coming up with zero, a goose egg, to 100% failure? What's our risk of partial completion? It's only 50%. We only achieve 50% of the returns. What's our risk of time delay? It took us 4 years, not 2 years. Our risk of additional cost, it cost us $400,000, not $200,000. So really talking through those things, and you can make notes off to the side. That's why you're rewriting the posted notes here. And usually it ends up that there's 5-6 posted notes off, and there's writing on the, butcher paper and stuff behind it. And that's why it's important to have lots of room in the room as you're going through it. But really rank those from, highest execution risk to like, nope, that's in the bag, guarantee we're going to get that done. And so anyways, what do you see here, Sue? Because this is usually the one that has the biggest variable. Back to everybody's an optimist, so of course we're going to get it all 100%
well,
done.
and I go back to just looking through all of these, right? Where there's a reason you start with the impact to the business, and then there's a reason why you go to control and why cost is number 3. Just like you were saying, right? Just because a software program is cheaper than another software program doesn't mean it's going to have the same impact on the job. or on the company. It doesn't mean you're going to have the same type
Right.
of in that case maybe control of data that you're collecting, all of that. So the cost is a lot less of an issue really once you've done the others. But I think doing them in the order of, impact to the organization, the control that we have, the costs that we have associated with that, even though we are eternal optimists, and that's why I think when we get back to the pick method, maybe for contractors, it ought to be the pie method, where we believe everything is possible and we can implement it all. So we don't really go to the C and the K very often. We might think it's challenging.
You mean like Ed talked about it? It's the
Yeah,
go
it's
or the
go or no
go-go
go, and that's
process.
it, right? There's two, one side of the line or the other. So we like the one side where it's possible or we can implement. So we like the pie as opposed to the pick. But I think taking them in order and actually taking the group through that order helps them to get to that mind shift of the risk, right? Because we've looked financially at the impact. We've looked at what we can and cannot control. We've looked at what it's going to cost as an outlay of cash. Now, when you start looking at that risk, they've got those things in mind. And I think, if nothing else, it helps us to get a bit more into the full concept of the pick and not just living in pie the whole time. So I think the order of this is important because it does help get our heads better aligned for the risk factors that we need to talk about.
I like that, the pie. So, okay, that's cool. I'm going to take that one away. So pie instead of pick, and then Ed is, well, we had the go process and we had the go-go process.
Yeah,
We had to
yeah,
get the no-go
yeah.
process in there. So, okay, no, that, yeah, super valid. And that is exactly why it's important to take the team through things in this order. Oh, and by the way, there's a high
Yeah,
cognitive load to going and doing this. So don't hesitate to break this up into
yeah.
a couple different sessions, over time. There is a very high cognitive load to going and doing this because there's a lot of discussion. So don't hesitate to break it up midday, take people out for a few hours to go have some fun, clear the cobwebs out of the brain and everything. But this is where you're really developing people and their ability to think. And so again, in a you know, stage 6 type of company, you're going to have a half dozen people that do this complexity in their heads almost instantaneously. Toyota described it, like that they had about 40 of those people in Toyota. So think about a company the size of Toyota that could go walk into an operation and they could identify the problems and move to an action plan in 2 minutes, and they had 40 of those. And the next tier down, it took them 2 months to go work through, the system to do that. And the next tier down, it took them 2 years to be able to identify it. So that's kind of like, Sue, in your world, that the field engineer that's out there learning, doing the math, studying it, doing the time study, writing everything down very manually. Yeah, it's going to take them a couple of years to come to some of those conclusions. But you need your area managers to be able to come to that conclusion almost instantaneously because it's a live fire
That's right.
exercise at that point. So, okay, so we're there, and with that information, now the pick starts to make a little bit more sense. Like that's now all of the context around there that the team can come over and force fit everything in there. And like Sue said, force rank these things so that everything doesn't fall into pie. Force rank these across both axes, right? Force rank them down return and force rank them across execution, so you have an even distribution curve. You might not like what ends up in the kill category, and that's fine. Just don't think about it as like we're going to kill it forever. We're just going to, we may kill it for now, but we might come back to it later. Focus on the implement, stage. Let's get those assigned out to action items, and then let's dive a whole lot deeper on the challenge stages, because those are going to be our bigger bets, our bigger risks and everything. And that's, as a leader, where you should be spending your time. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. What do you think, Sue? Man, I mean, there's a lot when you actually think about the basics of prioritization,
There
right?
are, because usually you just look at again this stage one contractor. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, it starts to get much more complex when you've got
Right, but that's because that stage one contractor, he or she, and usually it's a he and a she, it's a team. They bet everything, like
Yes.
their house, their
Yep.
car, their firstborn. They bet everything on starting this business, and so they do have, and because of the scale of it, and because of what's at risk, they do have a great amount of situational awareness around it. It's just that dramatically changes as things get big enough, and you realize like I don't even have enough time to open up every change order
Right.
log in the company. Like that's a big turning point when you say, how do I actually manage that and make sure that works? When you're like, I don't even have enough time in a day to just open up and look
Yep.
at every change order log,
Yeah.
much less know what's in there. Well,
Yep.
that's kind of scary, right? so so you got to, systems change as you grow. So now we've got to take what these things are. This is the pick smart part. So the SMART is an acronym for make it specific. What are we going to go do? Make it measurable. What is it? What does it look like when we're done? What does it look like now? What's it going to look like in the future state when we're done, so that we can actually tell what done looks like? Remembering that there is a degree of done, like Sue, like you talked about. There's done doesn't look like 100%. So get really clear on what done looks like, because it might be that as you take this process and going from
Right.
stage 3 to 4, you just take it to this level. And as you go from stage 4 to 5, you take it up another level. It's still the same thing, but you're now taking it from 80% to 95% as you go up and as you change in stages of company. So it may be the same exact thing, just different degree of done. So make sure it's measurable. Is it achievable? This is where we, hey, given our capabilities, our capacity, can we actually do it? Hope is not a strategy. Desire doesn't create capabilities or capacity. I mean, it's a prerequisite, but it doesn't. Is it relevant? Like, does this really align? Which hopefully the entire process we just went through ensures that it's relevant. Hopefully it's not in the pie category. It's over in the, look at the whole board and everything. We really did it. And then who's responsible? Who's gonna get this thing done? Not that's not the total person. For something this big, there's gonna be lots of other people involved. But who's spearheading this thing? You can't lead by committee, so to speak. There can be some guidance committees. There can be that, and there's gonna be a lot of people involved. But there's got to be a who that is attached to, like, okay, if this thing isn't right, who? And you're not looking for a throat to choke.
Right.
You're just like being getting some clarity on who. And then time bound, when are we going to do it? So your SMART goal will look something like, move this thing from X to Y by this date, and because of, and outline what the rationale is, because it's important, because that helps other people really understand it. And a lot of times try and tie it to how will it impact our scoreboard or our strategy, and it should impact both our scoreboard and our strategy. So that's the SMART part. So pick SMART. There's the group exercise. We'll be wrapping up here, and we got 2 or 3 more things to cover, and then we'll be wrapping this up. So what do you think, Sue? Anything to add to pick SMART?
Just to emphasize that again, what you've measured and what's achievable at one level, you may measure the same, but is achievable at a different, achievable at a different rate at a different level, or you just may even measure it differently while you're looking at achieving it. So none of these stay the same. As as people grow, as your organization grows, all of that, they will continue to need to be modified. Just going back and saying, okay, what do I want to move from here to here, by when and why? So always make sure you're looking at the level that you're at for the right SMART goals.